all the best learning experiences I ever had were from amazing storytellers, including Charles Brewer. He told so many great stories in his class. So I think that's my fingerprint. And I think it's coming together nicely. It has been such a pleasure to write. And I think that's a sign that I'm on the right track for myself, because when I'm writing something, I think, yeah, this feels good to me. This feels like this is really what I want to say and what I want my students to read.
You just heard Bridgette Hard from Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Garth and special guest host Jane Halonen interviewed Bridgette for a Part 2 interview on Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff.
Hi, my name is Brooke Wisenhunt, and I'm from Missouri State University. And one of the things that excites me about STP is that I feel like that is where I found my professional home. After spending a lot of years going to other professional academic conferences, I landed at a conference full of people from STP and really felt like this was the place that were my people. And I think that that's something that you can miss out on if you don't join this organization. So go to teachpsych.org and please join and become one of these people that is a member of our community.
Psych Sessions is proud to partner with Macmillan Learning. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, content matters, and these days, digital content matters more than ever. Macmillan Learning's Achieve elevates interactive teaching and learning with an extraordinary range of online course content in a powerful yet easy-to-use platform. Interactive ebooks, innovative assessments, engaging videos and activities, helpful instructor resources. Achieve brings it all together and makes it easy for you to find what you need and what you want. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning. Hey everyone, it's Garth. Psych Sessions has been around for nearly a decade, offering free professional development to listeners all over the world. And we couldn't do it without your listening support, but we also need other kinds of support from our listeners. If you could go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen and subscribe and like the podcast, maybe even leave a review for us, it's incredibly helpful to getting out to more teachers of psychology. And did you know that Psych Sessions is a 501c3 nonprofit organization? We can do what we do because of gifts from people like you. So please head to psychsessions.org if you would like to donate today. The best way you can help us is to become a monthly donor at any level. Is Psych Sessions worth $5 a month to you? $10 a month to you? More? Please go to psychsessions.org and give whatever you think this is worth. Your gifts keep Psych Sessions free for everyone. Our goal is to have a huge impact, and you are a part of it. Thanks.
Well, here is a woman who needs no introduction, but we're going to give her one anyway. And I am here today with my co-host here on Duke campus for the Psych 1 conference, Jane Halonen.
Good morning.
Hello. And we are here with Bridgette Hard. Bridgette, it has been, I just looked, the last time we did one of these. Do you want to take a guess at the year?
It was during the IPI work.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was. I think when we were in Washington, D.C. meeting for IPI. And so that would have been is it 2018, 2019? Pre-pandemic.
2018 is when it released. So I don't know if we recorded in 17 or 18, but yeah.
17.
Whoa.
So what, as you hear that, Bridgette, what meaning do you make of that?
Wow. So that would have been, so first of all, that time I remember both of you a lot because we were so involved with the Intro Psych initiative and all the work that we were doing, trying to think about how are we going to help people teach this class. And that at the same time, I was pretty new to Duke at that time. So I was just starting my journey as a faculty member for the very first time, because before that I was not a faculty member at Stanford. And So I was learning how to be a faculty member and at the same time getting to have this opportunity to be part of this whole big initiative to think about this course that I love and how people are going to teach it. So there was a lot going on for me at that time.
And now it's been almost a decade. Well, 7, 8.
Yep.
Yeah. 8 years. It just flies.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I know.
And how long have you been at Duke for then?
This is 8 years. Yeah. This year is 8 years.
Yeah, you were just starting out, and there was. I re-listened to it, and there's a kind of tail wagging. Oh, I'm so excited that I'm, that kind of transition. So, 8 years, you've probably learned a few things.
I have. Yeah, I know. And I will say that I was at that time just very excited and enthusiastic about all the newness of being at Duke. And I will say that 8 years later, I still really love being at Duke. But I feel more at home here now. And yeah, I feel, just like both of you, I've aged and I've matured in a variety of ways.
Yeah. Looking back, is that a crazy time in your life to think about that move from Stanford to Duke? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like what kind of meaning do you make of that now?
Well, partly that was getting to come home. So I'm from North Carolina originally. So getting to come and be back in North Carolina again, where I'm from. But it was also about suddenly having the opportunity to grow and to stretch in ways that I hadn't gotten to do before. And being at Duke was a big part of that because Duke, one thing that I really love about Duke is that it creates a really good home and a really good space for people that are more teaching focused faculty. We have a really good community of more teaching focused faculty at Duke, which is really cool and really unique.
How do you explain that? Because I know we have colleagues that don't have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
What is it about Duke? What's the secret sauce that makes that work?
I think that we are very lucky to have some key administrators, some people in higher up leadership roles who really care about teaching and who recognize that a lot of our amazing tenure track scholars who are brilliant and wonderful and who already manage so much with their research programs maybe shouldn't be expected to also be expert teachers. And so there's some value to there's like a niche in the ecosystem that needs to be filled by people that have that as their specialty. And so I think that's been part of it. And then they've realized through some experimentation, I think that if you bring in people like me and you actually treat us like important members of the community and you give us
full citizens,
and you give us opportunities to lead and to share our ideas with the broader community, then like really good things happen. So I think that some people were brave and took a chance. And then over time, I think has seen that it's been a really great way to go. So now we're hoping, I want Duke to be a place that is thought of as a role model for how we treat teaching focused faculty and have other people follow in our footsteps. That'd be really cool.
In fact, I think the phrase teaching focused faculty is something you've embraced. And I love the emphasis that it places because it's not snotty. It's territorial. It's like, this is who we are and we're proud of it. And now let's deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and actually one of the things that I've gotten to do at Duke this past year that's been a really, really cool opportunity is to co-chair this committee that's appointed by the provost. And part of our charge is to figure out how we're going to define effective teaching at Duke. So what does effective teaching mean? And how do we define it as a community? And how are we going to evaluate it and reward it? For all tenure track and other faculty as well. And then a second part of it has been to think about how to create better guidelines and consistency for the teaching focused faculty, including thinking about what we should be called. A lot of schools have like teaching professor as a special marker. And on one hand, that it makes sense because it's highlighting what that person specializes in, but it's also this way of marking that faculty member as different and maybe as like not a real professor, the way that the tenure track folks are. And so what we're actually proposing that we've gotten a lot of support for, but we still have to vote on it next year. So we'll see. I might be sharing this and then it gets shot down, but I don't think so. I think this is going to go forward is that we are going to kind of create a whole sort of parallel name that rather than tenure track, it's career track faculty. And that we will have different series within that highlight different things that we do. So teaching series, teaching and scholarship series. We do have professors of the practice who are have work that they do in industry and outside of academia. But then, and this is the really bold, daring thing that we're proposing that people have been pretty excited about. Even though we have these little special titles internally, we're proposing that externally, we just call everybody the same thing. So we just call them professor, associate professor, assistant professor, and just flatten that hierarchy, at least externally.
I love that.
So that we don't have these barriers to opportunities, to funding, to all of that. And we can still use little titles to communicate with each other about what we do so we understand each other's roles, but that we would kind of really level things a bit and honor everybody as equally important parts of the community.
I wonder if long-term, though, that would not diminish the need to have those fine distinctions.
I don't know.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. But it's exciting. And that's been, again, why I'm still feeling enthusiastic about being at Duke 8 years later is that I'm having a chance to do stuff like that, which is really fun. And to feel like my ideas are, can actually make a difference and that people might actually listen to them and do what I say, which is really cool. Or at least do what I think. And I'm getting to work with a lot of amazing people that also have a lot of ideas that we've been pulling together. So that's been great.
So at what level does that kind of openness happen at Duke? So is that a person who has the power to say, I can enact this and you can run with it? And if that different person is in that position, this doesn't happen?
That's a good question. And I know, Jane, you've been a dean before, so
I have.
You know probably more than I do about how like faculty governance works. I feel like I'm getting a crash course this year in how things actually happen at a university and who decides things. And so my understanding is that there has to be anything that relates to faculty titles and career trajectories and promotion standards, things like that have to go through like faculty council. There has to be a vote by the main governance structure for the entire university.
And that's assuming that it's not necessarily a unionized campus, because then you've got two layers of oversight.
Right. And we're not in that way. So I think they have to vote. And then there's other decisions that I think just the provost and other people say, yes, we agree and we are going to do that. And so, yeah, I suppose there's always some risk that someone in that role in the future could change things. But
right. So you're co-chairing this committee and this will go to a vote. And people could not vote for it as well, right?
That is possible. Yeah. We spent a lot of time this year thinking about all the grumpy perspectives that sometimes come up in a university around teaching.
That's
and around
wise.
Teaching-focused people.
That's a nice way to say it, isn't it, Jane?
Grumpy perspectives. Yeah. And actually, it's sometimes disheartening to have to think about that, but that's the reality, because there are a lot of ingrained cultural attitudes, especially in certain disciplines more than others, I think, about teaching not being super important. There are also the problems that faculty are a very individualistic lot who don't like being told what to do. So
they're all the smartest kid in the room. That's part of the problem. They all are the smartest. And then you get them all in the same room. Somebody's got to be the smartest kid in the room, and you have to pretend that they all are. The secret to being a good dean.
Yeah. But I think it's been important to try to think about that and then think about, well, how do we help everybody feel on board with the importance of teaching and on board with what we're asking them to do, and to feel like they have autonomy and control and can be successful in the things that we're asking them to do. So part of that is the way that I would be curious to know how you guys define effective teaching, but in trying to think about how do we define what effective teaching is, we've really come up with 3 very simple criteria. And one of them is just having good course design. So knowing how to design a learning experience that has clear goals, where you're going to measure learning in ways that make sense given your goals. You're going to have activities that support students toward those goals. And that in designing those activities, you're using what we might call evidence-based practices, or we've had to adjust the language here because it turns out some of my colleagues get freaked out by the word evidence-based practice. I know that's a whole other story. So saying things like using practices that are well regarded as effective.
That's so inefficient, but it works.
But it works. And that so that's sort of part 1 is really good course design. And then part 2 is just creating a learning environment, a supportive learning environment in which students can really learn from you and from each other, because there's a strong learning community. And so a lot of that idea we've drawn from some of Steve Chu's ideas about trust and included things like, behaving in ways as an instructor that build trust with your students, such as being appropriately available and giving timely feedback and treating students fairly, things about the way that you help students connect with one another and creating an environment in which people feel like they can engage with different points of view and things like that. So that's point number 2 is the learning community. And then point number 3 is just always trying to be better. So
I like that.
Continuing to grow and
I
to
love
learn.
the simplicity of that third one, especially.
Yeah, that it's always a work in progress and there's no one size fits all. So part of being an effective teacher is trying to learn what works for you by engaging with your community of other teachers, learning ideas and strategies, sharing what you learn with other people, and continuing to try to learn and grow. And so far, as we've shared that definition of effective teaching with people, it's not been too controversial. People have felt pretty like, that seems pretty sensible. That makes sense. It's like point number 1 is have a plan and know what you're trying to accomplish. Point number 2 is don't be a jerk and create a learning environment in which people feel comfortable. And then point number 3 is just keep trying to be better. So I think that definition is going to fly for us.
It's broad enough too that it can cover online teaching, face-to-face teaching. Do you guys do online sections at Duke?
We have a little bit of online learning, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of discussions actually about whether we should be doing more to experiment with online learning. There are some other ingrained faculty attitudes against online learning that I think mostly come out of the pandemic. And I'm sure you'll have seen this at your institutions well, where, some folks were so traumatized is too dramatic a word.
I'm not sure it is too dramatic. I was traumatized.
It was really stressful.
It was awful.
For people to teach remotely who had no training or experience in how to do that. And so I think many of them equate online teaching with the remote emergency teaching that we had to do, and they think of it as watered down education.
Yep.
And so some folks have been very resistant to having very well-designed online learning experiences. So we're working on, that's not my committee's charge. There's actually a separate committee that has to work on that piece of it. But thinking about ways that we can be more innovative with our teaching structures, including offering online learning when it makes really a lot of sense to do so.
So you're going to reward, ideally this would be measured and rewarded. So how is the assessment are these objective enough measures that you can assess them? I'm sure you're working on that.
Yeah. So we designed a rubric that details what effective teaching is and then tries to lay out different levels of what that might look like. And we're proposing some starter standards that departments can use to build their own standards for promotion and tenure around teaching. Encouraging that the goal should be for people to be working toward being effective. Everyone should be effective because effective teaching is something anybody can do. We've defined it in a way that's achievable for anybody. If you have the right support and the right training, you can do this. This doesn't require you to be a sage on the stage, rock star, lecturer, or whatever. But now it'll be up to departments to take what we create and then decide, yes, this makes sense for us. We may want to modify it in some of these ways, and then build that into their promotion standards, even for tenure track faculty. So that has to happen next too.
Have you thought about how you would distinguish people who sort of meet expectations versus the ones who excel, which is the tension that is involved in this kind of reform process?
Yeah. So in building our rubric, we started with just thinking about what the level of effective would be. What is it when people are really meeting this
good
bar?
Enough. They're good enough.
Yeah, they're good enough. And then what might be below that. But we did also build a level for exemplary teaching as well. So thinking about what's the level above that. And then encouraging departments to consider exemplary teaching, especially when people are being promoted to full professor. That to be promoted to full, not only should you be effective, but maybe there's some evidence that you're exemplary as well. Unless, and I don't know how every university does this a little bit differently, but at Duke, if you're tenure track to be promoted to full professor, you need to be good across the board in research, teaching, and service. But you really kind of need to be great in at least 2 of those categories, to be exemplary in 2 of those categories. And one of them probably should be research because we're an R1 university.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but exemplary teaching then could be recognized in that way using the rubric. And then we've also highlighted there's lots of ways you can collect good evidence about teaching. We know that a lot of folks at Duke already recognize that course evaluations are useful in certain ways, right? They're a way for students to have a voice in the process and to share what they liked, what they didn't like. But they're flawed for a number of reasons. They can be biased in certain ways based on instructor identity. They can be flawed if you don't ask really good questions in your course evaluations. That you can kind of get something that feels more like a popularity evaluation or like a customer service survey. But so we've highlighted that we should revise course evaluations to align better with our definition of effectiveness. So asking questions that get students to share more about what the learning community was like, for example, and whether the assessments and the activities made sense given the goals of the class, things like that. But then we need to expand beyond that. So we need to think about sources of evidence that include peer observations, having your colleague come and watch you teach, or having your colleagues look at your course materials or your syllabus and give you feedback on it. And also yourself as a source of evidence. So we want to encourage more reflection among faculty to think about their teaching. And so are encouraging the use of things like an annotated syllabus where the instructor goes through their syllabus and adds notes and comments to explain their pedagogical choices. This is why this is an important goal for my class. This is why my assessments are the way that they are. And that's a way that they can articulate the thoughtfulness of what they're doing, the ways that they're trying to be a better teacher. But it also has this wonderful benefit of forcing faculty to even think about that in the first place, which we think will by itself make them better teachers, just to make them think about it.
That was exactly my thought. You know what I love about what you've done is I couldn't tell you at my institution how they define effective teaching.
Most institutions don't. Right. They don't define it at all.
But when I know that when we go in to evaluate a peer, there is a form that gets filled out, but you don't know what that form is based in, like what theory or what definition. And oftentimes, I mean, I've seen many different things come through that form, including pretty complicated or multifaceted like assessment. And this, you can get your head around this. You can have hallway conversations about these three areas of effective teaching. How do you all do it at UWF?
Well, I was in charge of an architecture for redesigning university guidelines while I was a dean. It took 5 years.
Wow.
And ultimately, the design that we came up with is still the one that exists at the university. Now, some minor modifications, but we have things spelled out behaviorally really well, and it overlaps a lot of what you're saying. We also have the same challenges with student evaluations. That my favorite bad example from a student evaluation is instructor demonstrates command of the subject matter. Well, how the hell would a student who's taking a course for the first time know? No. They wouldn't, but they will comment on it, right? So at this point, we probably revisit our guidelines about tenure and promotion every 3 to 4 years. In fact, I'm really tired of it, and I don't ever want to do it again. But the guidelines are really clear. We don't have grievance issues. We don't have people who are insanely unhappy or unrealistically unhappy because the guidelines are there. We also, in the original architecture, asked people to make a judgment about what their rating should be. So it forces the reflection.
Yeah.
And that's optional. You can just let someone else lay a label on you, but in your narrative, you give any extenuating circumstances that happened in the year. So if you had illness in the family and it's an atypical year, or you had the class from hell, which happens, you have a chance to say, here's the broader context. And now, given all that, my achievements this year are these, and this is why I think I deserve to be exemplary, or this is, I'm satisfied just to be good enough. And that seems to work really well.
I think one thing I love about that, and it's amazing that you all have that all in place already, and why we want to have something similar, is that it's really trying to create the same structure for faculty success that we're trying to create for student success, right? So when you're teaching a course, you have to have clear guidelines for what's expected. What is it that you want your students to learn and be able to achieve? And you need to have rubrics that can fairly evaluate them based on the evidence that they provide. And then it's great when you can also encourage them to self-reflect on their own learning.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of folks who are doing these more like ungrading approaches do something very similar to this, where students write a reflection on their own learning and maybe even submit a portfolio that goes along with it that provides evidence for why they think they've earned the grade that they did. And it's trying to apply those same good course design principles to the way that we work with faculty as well. So I like it because it's also then modeling for faculty. Hey, look what happens when you create this clear structure and expectations. It's really helpful, right? So now go do that for your students. And so I love when the way that we're training faculty in teaching is modeling the very things we want them to do.
And it's teaching. A little bit by stealth, isn't it? Mm-hmm. which helps when you've got the grumpies.
Yes.
Which deans would refer to as the bastards.
Oh.
Just a little insight. Mm-hmm. The 10% of people that take up most of your time when you're trying to manage.
How did you all come to these 3 categories? Like, what was the process?
So we started by, like any good psychological scientist, or this is actually a group of people from all different disciplines. All the different schools at Duke actually were part of this committee. We went to the literature and tried to see what we could find. And one of the things that we found, we looked at some things that other schools were doing, but the most influential thing that we found is called the Framework for Assessing Teaching Effectiveness, or FATE. And I'm blanking on the lead author on this. I think it might be Simonson. I'm hoping I'm not getting that wrong. But this is a project that was basically commissioned by the National Academy of Sciences. So it was designed for evaluating STEM teaching primarily, but it was pretty broadly applicable. And it actually had 4 categories rather than just 3. One of the categories was about course design. There was a whole category that was just about evidence-based practice. And then another that was more about relational learning community things. And then continual improvement was one of the categories. We simplified it down a little bit just because simpler usually is better. And we found that we could put course design and evidence-based practices together into a single category.
That's wise.
Yeah. And we wanted something that would feel generalizable. We knew, especially our colleagues in the humanities, as soon as they would see that this was a framework from the National Academy of Sciences, it felt somehow irrelevant potentially to them. And this was made for STEM courses. Their courses, they often feel work differently. They have different goals, different structure. So we needed something that felt really accessible to everybody. So, but that framework was really helpful as a starting point. Although I think it's still relatively new and I think is still being tested and vetted in different places and will probably evolve over time. And maybe what we've created will be part of that process. So we've created something that builds on that framework, and then maybe that will inspire other similar approaches.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool that you all are doing that. And I don't know if it will kind of make its way out of Duke once it's done, but I think something like that would be very helpful. So I hope that you give a talk on it at some point
that's a good idea.
In the future. Yeah. Because
I bet there's a conference that you might be able to do that.
I bet you there is.
Just a hunch.
I bet you there's lots of conferences that would like that. I don't know, like just for our colleagues, why is there a need for something for what you're doing for these 3 categories or whatever it is? Like what need does this meet out there right now? Because you've seen the literature. You probably what Duke was doing before. You know that sometimes these things are in place, sometimes they're not. They're not in place. Why this? Why is this the way that you've gone with it?
Well, I mean, I think we've gone this way for some of the reasons we detailed earlier, which is that we need clearer guidance. If teaching will not be taken seriously unless it's defined very clearly and can be evaluated fairly. And we, at places like Duke, we have those kinds of structures and mechanisms for evaluating scholarship. So when tenure track folks are going up for tenure, there are rubrics that they use to evaluate their research programs, lots of ways that's carefully evaluated. But in our faculty handbook, and I'm sure in lots of institutions, the guidelines say that you need to have quote unquote good teaching. And that is it.
That's it.
That is it. There's no clarity around what that means. And so without that clarity, I think it's easy to see and infer that teaching doesn't matter as much. And so I think in order for teaching to be better, we have to show and signal that it's taken more seriously. And you do that by defining it clearly and evaluating it fairly. So I think that lots of institutions are in the same place that we are and need to create systems like this. And so if we can create something that others can build on, that'd be great. I think that would be a wonderful outcome. But I think another important step, another important need is that within higher education, just like within psychology education, and we're all people that care about research on teaching and learning, we do need good research to see what happens when you put systems like this in place. What actually happens? Like, do they actually make things better? Do people change their attitudes about teaching? Do they become better teachers when you put systems like this in place? And I think often universities, just like any other big structure or system, try things out all the time. Just try stuff and say, this seems like a good idea. Let's do it. And then have no plan in place for how they're going to assess whether it made a difference. And so they'll just rely on how people felt about it, which is probably mostly like, oh, it was okay. Yeah, it was
water to cooler talk.
Yeah.
As opposed to something more formal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think a really important step that we need to undertake, and that I hope other places will undertake too, is we need to assess further down the road what the outcomes of this process were and whether we made a difference. And that is really difficult to do because I don't think any of us do a great job of actually regularly assessing how faculty feel about teaching. So we have course evaluations we could look at. We could see if course evaluations get better, but I don't know that that's the best metric. So that's another thing that I'm interested in, but I haven't had a chance to really tackle yet, is how do you assess at a broader institution level attitudes about teaching, how people feel about it, whether they value it, and whether they're any good at it.
Isn't it interesting that we don't have that in place, and especially at teaching-focused like institutions that I'll give you an example. At our community college, teaching awards are given out when students nominate faculty. And I'm not sure if that is actually
that's more a
good
popularity
teaching.
contest.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it also, I imagine that they're like faculty who are extremely rigorous may not, of course, maybe they could get awarded, but may not get awarded as much as faculty who are not, for example. And yeah, I don't really know what to do with that when an institution kind of rewards based on these kinds of measures rather than something like what you're talking about.
In fact, when I was a dean, I came up with the concept of the time release impact professor, someone who does not get nominated for teaching awards, but down the road, students write letters to say, you made a difference in my life because of how you taught statistics, and I had no idea that this would be meaningful. And at the time the course is over, they don't know that.
Right.
But 5 years out, they look back and go, oh, that badass professor made a huge difference in my life. And so at least if people who are overseeing and making judgments about the teaching understand that teaching awards are fluff, they're fluff locally. Then I think it can make a difference in the climate, the way people feel about what they're doing.
Yeah, that seems like an alumni award, teaching award can do something like that. But this point came up a lot actually in our conversations about how to evaluate effective teaching. And many people pointed out, well, sometimes you don't know whether someone was effective until several years down the road when you see how a student's able to apply some skill in their profession. And then people would then follow up and say, so what are you all going to do about that? We just laugh. I don't know. What can we do about that? I mean,
Well, the alumni survey is the standard approach with a response rate of 7%. You know, when you send things like that out, students are not necessarily obligated to give you reports. And so you may get a really weird, biased, low response that you can't, it's not valid. It's not helpful. So I'm not sure that's measurable.
Yeah. I don't know. I do think that universities could learn a lot from tech companies in the way. So one of the possible solutions to a problem like this, at least in terms of thinking about whether someone has long-term effectiveness over the course of a student's academic career at the university, would be to do a better job just collecting and integrating data that we collect across courses, right? So we have lots of data in terms of student grades as they move through a curriculum. There's also data that get collected from various people on campus about student belonging and well-being and all of that. But we don't often have systems in place to integrate all of those data and then to analyze those data to gain insights into what's working and what's not. So like a tech company, like any of these social media companies, they harvest data from us constantly. And they're sometimes using that to sell us products. That's a big part of what they're doing. But they're also using it to make their own product better. So, companies like Instagram do A/B testing where they will roll out some new feature in one form versus the other, and then they will see what happens. And it's hard. we could be doing things like that in education. Maybe not A/B testing exactly like that, but we could be at least collecting data and looking at outcomes and seeing what predicts what more rigorously. But we often don't. We just hope for the best.
We do have an interesting strategy at our place that is fun. That when students graduate, while they're waiting to process, they're given an opportunity to fill out a blank that says, "Tell us who your most important influence was."
Oh.
And then at the end of graduation, 2 weeks after, you may get a little stack of cards that is very personal, indicating what it was that you did for the student that made them want to nominate you as the person who meant the most to them. So moving.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Do we do anything with the data? We just make our faculty feel good. The ones who get cards feel good. The ones who don't are kind of grumpy. But I was surprised at how effective that was in terms of getting a meta view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like
but the first step, I think, to building something like that is getting really clear outcomes of what you're calling effective teaching. I do have a question about, I have an idea and then I have a question. No, comment and a question. So you and I,
sure?
Yeah, I am now. So you and I interviewed Todd Rose, and we always talk about this jaggedness principle, right? And how faculty bring different like gifts and personality to teaching, and how you have to, with categories like this, with outcomes like this, you have to, they all have to be valued within those. The diversity of the way you can do effective teaching has to be seen in each of these categories. Is that a problem, do you think? And I think it's related to this next thing, which is, I just remember Steve Chu talking to me, I don't know, maybe I saw a talk of his and I followed up with him a decade ago, which was, his whole thing was, here are these evidence-based teaching practices, which mean nothing if the person, like as themselves, as evidence-based teaching practices, that does not mean that they are effective teaching. It is really how the person is using these things. So just because somebody is saying, I use whatever the effective teaching practice is, does not mean, the evidence-based teaching practice does not mean that they're doing it effectively, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Have you thought through any of that?
Yes. I think that our definition and our rubric do highlight that you're using these practices effectively, and that using them effectively means you're taking into account the context that you're in, what kind of class are you in? What's the level of your student? So we do try to nod toward all the different variables that come into play when you're using these practices, because the same evidence-based practice is not going to work the same way across every class. So there have to be adjustments. But that's a really good point. We did have a lot of discussion about that.
Well, and it seems like the questions you would ask faculty to reflect on would kind of guide them toward effective teaching, right? Like, oh, yes, I'm doing active learning, but it's not strategic to my goals. And so then you're not effective teaching, right? Or teaching effectively. And so just the questions themselves, like annotating a syllabus or something like that, will guide people. And so what questions are we asking people to reflect on? So I think like the whole process is valuable towards getting people on that path. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the jaggedness principle from the standpoint of the fact that it gives you some tolerance for things that you're not naturally good at. So just as an example, I get dinged a lot on not being up to date on technology. When I have a tech problem in the class, I go, okay, who's going to help me with this? And then I ask students to come up and fix it. And so reliably on my evaluations, and I'll simply say, I'm like your great grandmother, so cut me some slack here. This is a jagged part of my profile. I'm pretty good in the other stuff. Tech, I try hard, so I ask for your patience. And that seems to make a big difference in them being willing to rush up to help me, which is kind of fun.
Well, this is a good question. Let's throw it to Bridgette. Bridgette, if teachers have weaknesses, should they try to shore up their weaknesses, you think, or do you think they should focus on their strengths?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
It is a good question.
I think a little bit of both. I mean, I do think to the extent if a weakness is getting in your way, like if I discover that there's something I'm doing really, really poorly, and it's really impairing my ability to accomplish my goals as a teacher, then I probably should either work on it and figure out how to make it better, or find a different way. Like, how do I have this goal, maybe I can't use this kind of tool, but I need to find a different tool to do it. So I do think you have to work on it. in that way. But I also think it is okay. I think teaching should be joyful. And so I think sometimes if you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall, or if it feels like, I don't know that learning how to be good at technology really feels meaningful to me, right? Then maybe you find a different way, or you just acknowledge the weakness to students, I think in your case. And I love that actually, because I think students love it when we're just honest about being
they do love it. They do love it. Yeah.
Yeah. That, we don't expect them to be good at everything.
So where is that love of teaching in these three categories in effective teaching? Where is the enthusiasm, the intrinsic motivation, the love? Does that get assessed in those?
Category 2.
A little bit of category 3. So when we've outlined our definition of effective teaching, actually our very first paragraph that we've written leading into the more formal definition highlights that teaching should be as enjoyable for faculty as it is for students. Like trying to highlight that this is something we want to be fun. Not something that feels like a burden and feels like something you have to do because your chair made you do it. But we've also built into the continual improvement and growth that's part of its purpose, is to help this feel like a meaningful part of your professional life, that you're continuing to grow and learn and to find ways to make it work for you. And so I do think our definition highlights a little bit of both of these, like working on the things maybe that you're not so good at, to the extent that those things feel meaningful and are going to help you enjoy your teaching more and be more effective at it. But that it's also okay to figure out what works for you as an individual and sometimes play to your strengths, I think.
There is a subtext, though, when you're talking about continuous improvement, that you are highlighting your weaknesses. And so now with this as a formal category, there are going to be people who are not going to be happy with being called on to talk about their weaknesses and overcoming the plan. The grumpies will be that.
Right. Group. Although I do think so one way to interpret the continual growth is trying to shore up your weaknesses. But another way is just to try something new. So take a risk, learn something new. So, many of us right now are trying to figure out how the hell to teach with AI. And it's not a weakness. It's just something new. And our old approaches to many forms of assessment can't deal with this new technology. And so we're all, that's something new, and we have to try to take some risks and experiment a little bit. So I think that kind of thing can fall under that category too.
It's pretty amazing how disruptive AI has been in such a short period of time.
Incredibly.
Fascinating.
Incredibly disruptive.
Jane, looking back to the pandemic, you had to pivot to online, and you had
7 days.
Right. But looking back now, are you glad that it happened or not?
I learned a lot because I'd always said I either wanted to retire or die before I had to teach online. And I proved to myself that I can do online. My teaching evaluations dipped just a little bit, not significantly. But for me, the problem was I didn't feel magic. I felt mechanical. And I need the magic. I mean, that's what I'm in it for. And so I learned a lot. So therefore, yes, I'm glad I had the experience. Do I ever want to teach another online class? No. And I will do things like take extra assignments if I have to, so I don't have to have an online class. I know a lot of faculty like a balance of online and face-to-face because it gives them freedom. Give me face-to-face and stick me in the department, and I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, that's how I felt about online teaching too. I'm glad that I did it. I definitely learned some things from it, but I'm really glad to not be doing it right now.
Yeah.
It took me, I've been teaching online for better part of 2 decades, I think, at this point, and in part. And I think it was just in the last few years that actually all my teaching really is at a place where I'm really happy with, where there's magic, where I feel like I figured something out. And I don't know if that's a mid-career thing. I'm not sure, but I think it was based on a sabbatical, first of all, just to have the time to sit back and reflect on my teaching and take everything we are always learning. Like we're at Psych 1, we're going to, in the next couple of days, we're going to get some amazing ideas, and you don't even know what to do with all the stuff that you are always taking in. But having the time in mid-career to step back, take a sabbatical, think about what are my goals, how do I want to do this? And now I feel like both my face-to-face classrooms and my online classroom have a little magic in them, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the goal. Yeah. So Anyway, what else do we want to talk about? We've got Bridgette in the hot seat.
Can we talk about what it's been like to coordinate the conference for 10 years?
Oh gosh, 12
Is that
years.
right?
Actually 13, but we had 1 year, we had COVID. So there was 1 year we didn't get to have the conference.
Did you guys pivot at that point or did you?
2020, we just canceled.
Yep.
Because the world was upside down.
Oh, it was June. It was early.
Oh yeah. And I know Tip Northwest was canceled too, that year.
Did we cancel? I know one of them we moved online, but it might have been the next year, 2021. Maybe we just canceled.
2021, we did Psych 1 online, but 2020, we just canceled because just like you, I was suddenly having to teach online. My kids were at home all the time. And I just decided, you know what? This year, we're just not doing it. Yeah. And that was the right call. And then 2021, we were online. But then all the other years, we've had an in-person event.
Yeah.
And we were at Stanford for how many years? Let's see, 2012 to 2017, so about 5 years. And then we've now been at Duke for longer than we were at Stanford.
I do remember the speaker dinner for the first one. And our lovely Charles Brewer was there. And he and I had been doing conferences forever. So I think you looked at us as the seasoned people who knew all the answers. It was so cute. It's like, I have this idea and I wonder if this will work. And there was just such excitement about watching the founding of the conference. And so to see how well it's thrived has been really exciting.
Yeah, this conference changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, really did. And it's funny, I was telling you earlier that my youngest child is now 14 years old, but she was only 1 year when we had the very first Psych 1 conference in 2012. And I was, just coming off of maternity leave and was sitting down with James Gross, who I worked with so closely at Stanford, teaching intro psych. And he had this idea. He said, this is the 10-year anniversary of our program here at Stanford. Wouldn't it be great to do something special? And he floated this idea of a conference. And I had been thinking about how great it would be to have a conference at some point around intro psych. And he just said, so why don't you do it? And I had just come off maternity leave and I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at home and I was exhausted. And I thought, oh gosh, well, okay, maybe we try to do this, but I had no idea what I was doing. So the first thing that I did was to email Charles Brewer, because he was my intro psych professor way back in the day, who I looked up to so much, and asked him, how do I do this? And he made so many wonderful suggestions. He recommended people like Jane, and Steve Chu and lots of others as well. And then he gave me very clear guidance about, when you're designing a conference, really think about what do you want people to get out of it? And really encouraged me to build in a lot of breaks so that people would have time to reflect and to talk with each other in between presentations. And so there's so much about the structure of the conference that's rooted in that advice that he gave. But I also realized early on that designing a conference can be a lot like designing a course. So if you have goals and you think about how are we going to accomplish them, how do we have the right activities to get us there, then it can work really well. And so now it's amazing. And I got to meet so many amazing people through Psych 1. And we continue to have new people join us every year, many of whom have never been to a teaching conference before. This is their first experience
that's
with
exciting.
one. And they get to see how wonderful it is to connect with this community of people that all share that common interest and to get all these new ideas so that they feel excited about their teaching again.
What numbers are you looking at this year? How many attendees and how many are first-time attendees?
I think we've got about 75 this year, which is actually a little down from last year because our event is on the weekend this year, which is, as it turns out, maybe not the best time to have a conference for a lot of people, but it's the time that we could get the event space. So that's when we're having it. But it's always been less than 100. So we keep it intimate because by the end of the event, we want people to feel that they recognize each other, that they know each other's names, that they would feel comfortable going and sitting with anybody at lunch, staying connected afterward. And it's just too easy in a really big event to get lost in the shuffle. And so Psych 1 is small enough that every session is experienced together as a group. We don't split off into concurrent sessions. Everything is experienced together. And so that means there's this common ground throughout the entire event. So everyone is seeing the same things. We can all talk about the same things. And I think that really helps it to feel more cohesive. And we have really good food. That is key. I have learned from my involvement with NITOP that good food is key to a great conference, partly because teachers need to be pampered. They need to be treated very well and celebrated so that they can go home feeling re-energized.
Well, you've always had that. I remember going to Stanford one of the things that I loved when I went to Psych 1 at Stanford was the space and time to talk about sessions and process. Because at other conferences, which are great, but they're just different and bigger and whatever, you are just going from talk to talk to talk to demo to pie to whatever. And you built in that space for people to really process what they're doing. And I remember the first wine and cheese night at Stanford.
Yes, that's a tradition.
Yeah. And I remember thinking like, I don't know, maybe I was doing the AP reading by then or something. And so my expectation of food was quite low, and to go and have wine and cheese, and it was nice, and it was like the location was gorgeous. So I've got big expectations for tomorrow, Bridgette.
Well, I will say you can't beat Northern California weather, and
we
can't compete with that here in North Carolina. But so our wine and cheese, you'll see, is it's more pub style. So we have a pub on campus, and it's enough food to basically treat as dinner, and then wine and beer, and there's an outdoor space as well. So if the humidity is not too excruciating, people can go outside if they like. But though I know those Northern California summers were just divine. I miss them sometimes.
Yeah. We should probably talk about, I mean, it's been 8 years since we talked on the podcast, just about like what you've been up to. So, you've had a few writing projects since we talked, right? And you have a new one, which is, I think the big one is that you are doing your own intro book right now.
I am.
Yeah. And how close are you?
I am getting really close. So you mentioned earlier having a mid-career sabbatical. I had my first experience with a sabbatical last year, although at Duke for the teaching focused faculty like me, it's called a dean's leave instead of a sabbatical. But I got to have my first semester not teaching, and the purpose was to start writing a new textbook. So I'm on the interactive psych textbook with W.W. Norton, and that project was started, like probably around the same time as Psych 1. So it's been 12 years since we first started working on that book, and that's a multi-author book, and I'm one of several voices on it, and it's been a very big part of my life for a long time. This new project is all just me. And on one hand, that is terrifying because I have to write all the chapters. It's a lot of writing. But it's also been really, really fun because I've now been teaching intro psych for, I think I'm going on 17 years. Yeah. So about at least 16. So this next year will be year 17 of teaching intro psych. And when you teach the same course for almost 17 years, you really get a perspective on how it should be taught. And so this book has been so fun because it's just every chapter is, how do I want to teach this? Like, what is my vision for emotion and motivation, for sensation and perception, and trying to break it down in the way that I would do for my own students. And so it's very liberating. I'm getting really close. I have I'm working on a chapter right now that's kicking my butt. It's the clinical psych chapter. It's a monster. And I have another chapter, and a from the ground up chapter I have to write next. And then I'm going to be returning back to an earlier chapter in the book, will be my last chapter that I'll write. But it's one that I've written. I've written this kind of chapter before, so it'll be a little bit easier for me to pull it together because I've already done a lot of the research for what I would want to include. But it's getting there. But it has taken every ounce of self-discipline that I have.
Wow.
And I'm sure you experience similar things when you have a big writing project. You have to find the time to write, and just dedicating that time. If you can't chip away at the project on a regular basis, it will never get done. And so it's taken so much self-discipline to try to get in writing time a little bit every day if I can.
Is there a target?
For when to finish it, or how much to write?
Yeah, for when to finish.
I think we're hoping to have it out in a year and a half from now.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping all my chapters will be written by the end of this fall.
Okay.
And then it's just revising and doing all the things you do when you write a textbook, which is
a lot.
It's so much peer review. So every chapter has to be vetted and read by so many people who are fact checking, who are making sure that we're covering the ideas first accurately, so representing the field accurately, and then second in a way that really makes sense for our students. So getting perspectives of teachers, and making sure that this aligns with what they feel is important for their students to be learning and the way they want them to learn it. So there's so much of that review process, and then having to revise. And then this book will be an experiential book. So it's meant to be something that you interact with as opposed to something that you just read. So there are all these elements that also have to be built out to interact with in the book. And that's been a really big part of it because an interactive psych, the other book that I'm on, is also an interactive book. But this, one of the things that makes this project different is that, so you both know that my approach to teaching is very narrative based. Mm-hmm. I think it is so much easier to learn from a good story. And so every chapter is very narratively structured. There are a lot of stories embedded within it, and then overarching stories that tie everything together. And then part of that experience is becoming part of the story at various points in time. So, before you even read about something, experiencing it for yourself through a demonstration or through taking a little survey and then looking at your own data as you're learning about a concept. And all of that takes a lot of work to build out. And so I'm having to create all these ideas and then initial little storyboards for how they're going to work. And I never expected to be like a designer in that way, but it's been kind of fun. But it is taking a tremendous amount of time and making it hard to do like anything else right now. So I've been saying no a lot, which maybe is good. It's good for me to learn how to say no more. But I've had to, as a matter of survival, just say no to a lot of things so I can get the work done.
What's your fingerprint on an intro psych textbook? How did you approach it? I imagine, as someone who hasn't written one, that if I was ever to write one, which I'm not, that I would want to ask the question, what is going on out there, and how is this one different, or like, what do I bring to it? So I'm sure you had to ask that question.
I did. And I actually spent a lot of time doubting whether I had anything special to say. I spent a lot of time spinning my wheels thinking, well, I don't know. What can I do that hasn't already been done? There are a lot of intro psych textbooks out there, and there are a lot of really good intro psych textbooks out there. And what finally clicked for me was, first of all, just reminding myself that everybody learns well from a really good story. And I do think I'm a good storyteller. I have really good stories to tell, and I've built and collected so many stories about psychology. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to put all those in one place and to allow more students to experience them. So that's part of it. But the other is, I think we live in a world where young people, and I know this as the mother of teenagers, young people really need help learning how to care for themselves appropriately. And by that, I mean learning effective habits and strategies for how to manage their own well-being, their physical health and their mental health. So that was a big part of it. And then additionally, learning how to interact effectively with other people who are different from you. And so the sort of two key parts of this project are trying to curate the content more specifically around skills for life. So helping students learn things that they can apply to their own personal wellness, and learning things that are going to help them engage more effectively with a diverse world of people that experience and see things very differently than they do. So I'm pulling out some of the more traditional theories and concepts that we seem to cover in all of our intro psych textbooks and trying to replace them with some things that sometimes are missing. So for example, when I'm teaching about emotion and motivation, I'm including a lot more on academic motivation. Like, what is it that makes you feel driven academically, and giving students space to reflect on what they can do to actually stoke their own academic motivation. So types of choices they can make, or opportunities they can embrace within the context of a class that could help them feel more motivated in that class. I have a whole section on emotion regulation, which is often not found in intro psych textbooks and is so incredibly important. There is a whole slew of tools, well-researched tools for how to manage your emotional experience that students need to know about. So I'm trying to make some more intentional choices around the content to really focus on those particular themes, and then just trying to weave it all together in a way that feels like you can't possibly forget it because it's just such a good story. So that's the idea. And the part of that is like all the best learning experiences I ever had were from amazing storytellers, including Charles Brewer. He told so many great stories in his class. So I think that's my fingerprint. And I think it's coming together nicely. It has been such a pleasure to write. And I think that that's a sign that I'm on the right track for myself. Because when I'm writing something, I think, yeah, this feels good to me. This feels like this is really what I want to say and what I want my students to read. So that's been cool. And I'm also, as with any writing project, I am learning so much. Because when you write an intro psych textbook, the stakes are very high for getting things right. And we live in a world that is so filled with misinformation that I cannot just Google something and trust that I'm getting any useful information at all. So I'm having to go back and look at all of the original research articles by the historical figures that I choose to include and making sure I really understand what did Milgram really do? And what was the context behind this? And really making sure that I get those details right. And then also learning about new cutting edge things that are being done in relation to measuring the brain or in the realm of like psychotherapy and trying to teach myself those things in a way that I can share with students. So I have learned more over the last year and a half of writing than I probably had learned in the previous 15 years of teaching intro psych. And that's been really fun.
Did you leave anything out where you just thought, in my book, this is not going to make it?
I did spend a lot of time trying to think about Freud and how Freud goes in. Freud is in the book.
Good.
Freud had some very important ideas, but I am not covering the psychosexual stages of development. I think I mentioned them briefly just so that there's some mention that they exist, but I'm not going through the stages. I am touching on defense mechanisms because I think they're useful, but I am not putting them in a chapter on personality because I don't think they make any sense there. They're in the clinical chapter. And thinking about psychodynamic approaches to therapy and how they may play out in a therapy session. I also struggled a little bit with some of the old theories of emotion, the James Lang and the Canon Bard. And I ultimately am keeping them in, but trying to infuse more meaning into them, and then building out some more modern, like current views of emotion as well. Because there really are just certain things that's like, every book has them. And so you feel like you have to have them, but I did question, do I really need the Canon Bard theory? I don't know. Like, do students really need to know that? They need Schachter Singer, right? There's some theories that really launch onto a whole new kind of idea. So Schachter Singer theory, two-factor theory is super important for understanding the role of interpretation in your emotional experience, which has implications for emotion regulation and also for cognitive behavioral therapy. So like you need that. But there are some things I decided to keep in, but I'm very strongly emphasizing the pieces that students really need to know the most for their own well-being and for being able to get along with the social world.
Did you call James at some point to say, is it okay not to do this? Is it okay to leave this out? It would be nerve-wracking, I think, as a generalist to write some of these topics like clinical or whatever, if that's not the area that you come out of, right?
Well, and the process you're about to endure.
Oh, the review process.
The review process, as well-intended as the reviewers are, it's a real display of whatever their personal hobby horse is that they like to teach, and that can really throw a monkey wrench into your process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been through the process of getting reviews on chapters before. And I think in the same way, I think it's helpful to think of them the same way you do with your course evaluations. So sometimes you're going to get something that's just not that useful because it's someone's weird idiosyncratic preference that but I think most people wouldn't agree with. Sometimes someone doesn't like something, and what that implies is that I need to do a better job of conveying the meaning of why I've done it the way that I've done. And that's true in teaching too. If a lot of grumpy comments I get on a course evaluation tell me that I didn't do an adequate job of communicating why we were doing things the way that we were doing. And so that's still really helpful. And then occasionally you get something that's just gold, like you should go look up this reference. This concept here would be great to add in here. And I love that kind of feedback where I get to learn something new from someone who knows more than I do. But it's important. And it's just like course evaluations are important, as flawed as they are.
Well, it's interesting. When we give feedback, when we're asked to give feedback for these kinds of chapters, and maybe even like for reviewing articles, like how did you learn how to review an article and review a chapter?
Dead silence.
I know.
It's a really hard question to answer.
Well, I don't think we were ever trained. I mean, I think someone sends you an article and they say, give feedback, and you go, oh, okay. and then you plunge in. But there's no training. And in fact, legend is that whenever you submit an article, reviewer number 2 is going to blast you. And then as a reviewer, sometimes I'm writing and I go, oh crap, I'm reviewer number 2. Because I really don't like this article, and here's why. I think depending on the editors that you work with, they can sometimes give you some guidelines, some bowling bumpers about how to say things to people. And sometimes not. So sometimes the reviewers can be just incredibly harsh and acontextual, not really understanding what you're doing. And
yeah, well, and even what Bridgette said about offering a reference, sometimes it is good to step back from your subjective opinion or to know when you're giving feedback, what is your subjective opinion that's making you grumpy that they may not share versus what could be helpful in improving this. And even I think just framing review like that, like you are on a team to make this better.
Right.
So give something constructive would be helpful. And I've never received any kind of guidance like that for chapters or
articles. I never have either. I mean, I think I learned. I think we all learn how to give reviews from the kinds of reviews that we receive. And so, I think some folks receive a lot of really grumpy reviews, and so they interpret that as this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is being a critic of everything. And I think I must have gotten lucky that somewhere along the way in grad school, and probably writing research articles that had nothing to do with teaching. So in my former life as a more of a cognitive psychologist, had someone who wrote a really nice constructive review. And it felt very clear from the review that this person saw their purpose as more cooperative and collaborative and was trying to really help us to share our work with the world in a way that would be effective and would be appreciated. And I loved that so much. And this was actually a person who signed their review, which is such a rare thing, but someone who had said, I'm going to be accountable for what I say by even putting my name on this. And that was really impactful for me. So now when I review papers, I have occasionally found myself feeling like reviewer 2 because I just felt like this is really flawed in a way and I'm not sure how to get around the flaw that's here. Or feeling grumpy because of someone ignoring previous suggestions that I had made that I really did think were very important. But usually I try to be a collaborator and try to think about how do I help this person to get this published, especially in teaching journals like Teaching of Psychology, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, because most of us who are submitting to those journals are just trying to share our work. And, for some folks in teaching focused institutions, they need to be able to publish, and I want to help them to be able to share their work. So I feel like that's really the right thing to do. Am I correct? Is it Teaching of Psychology or Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology that actually provide more clear guidance for reviewers? I feel like I've seen a set of recommendations for how to write good reviews that
probably
I thought came from Teaching of Psych.
I think it's probably STLP that has done that more clearly. I don't know that for sure.
Well, and it doesn't surprise me that our little community would have that because we are, I think those of us who are mid-career and later in the STP world, there's something special about this community where you do want to help lift other people up. You do want what they produce to be really good. And so I imagine that our feedback just within the community is kind of maybe nicer than it would be outside of the community.
Well, here's the flip side of that, though. Occasionally, you get an assignment that is just terrible. And in 2 pages that you could spend hours doing constructive feedback, or you can say, this is not ready for the show. So take it back. In general, here are some things to do. And I'm much less collaborative in that situation because I don't want to be wasting my time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there something between being nice and being polite, or something? I don't know. There's like a difference there where you can you're not just going to be nice about it because if you look past it, then we're taking away from the integrity of what's happening. But you can be polite about it at the same time.
You also don't want to fill the journal with literature. And sometimes I think my undergrads write better than some of the things that get submitted. And that's when I really think, what are you trying to do with this article? Is this just a run down the runway to get the thing that you need for a good merit raise? Because this is pretty terrible. And if something's really terrible, I'm going to say as kindly as I can, this is really terrible. And you need to rethink this.
At what point will you stop reading?
I will stop on page 3 if it's bad enough.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of being collaborative and cooperative is to be direct and honest in your feedback, including by saying this isn't ready.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious if you have noticed, I have noticed since generative AI came on the scene that the papers that I'm reviewing do seem better written. Like I'm less likely to get tangled up in a sentence and think, oh, this needs to be reworded, which tells me that some folks are using AI to support their writing in various ways. I mean, we probably are too. I use it in different ways. And I'm wondering how you guys feel about that.
I feel like I'm just so new at dealing with AI. But I think one of my workarounds, trying to not get trapped by students just submitting AI products, is doing assignments that don't lend themselves easily to AI so that they're much more personal. And we've done some writing initiatives in our department that demonstrated, this was a little bit before AI became the disruptor, that a concentrated effort in a department can raise the whole level of student writing. It's pretty exciting. So on the whole, I'm not unhappy with the caliber of writing that I get. But I also know that I don't have as much an investment in turning out students who can do perfect APA format papers, because that's not the majority of students that I'm serving. I mean, most of them are going to be workforce. They need to know how to write a memo. They need to know how to write a technical report. They need to know how to talk to an audience. And if I design the assignment well, I'm going to get back good stuff. So far, AI has not been a problem for me, but we'll see, because I have 2 capstone courses coming up, and that's where my colleagues are starting to complain.
Yeah.
There's a brand new article that this group at MIT just released, and it's called Your Brain on ChatGPT, and they haven't, I don't think, submitted it for publication yet or peer review, but they did release it on their website. But it is basically exactly, they looked at this question, and so people can go Google that, but they looked at this question of what is the difference between using a search engine versus a large language model versus just your brain on writing these kinds of things. Tomorrow I'll be talking about this a little bit, but the results are what you would expect, but they're fascinating. So people should check that out. It's a quick read of the abstract just to see what happened there. But I guess I want to actually just ask you a couple questions. At which classes are you assigning this kind of writing in? Is it your intro psych class?
So Psych 101, we do have a research proposal project. So students across different phases write a research proposal for a psychological question of interest to them.
Okay.
And so we've experimented a lot with how to manage AI use. We started off just saying, don't use it.
Yeah.
No AI. That didn't go very well.
No.
Because we would get papers that, from a freshman who was failing the class that looked like they were written by a PhD student. And the number of conversations, anytime something like this would happen, we have a conversation with a student, a very supportive conversation about what are we seeing here and, what happened, and just eating up a tremendous amount of time. And so what we're trying now instead is a process where for each part of the project, we have an AI disclosure form that students read and that they need to fill out as they're working on the project. And it guides them towards certain uses of AI that we encourage, and then makes it very clear what their responsibility is in using it in those ways, and then what they should not be using it for. And they have to track, they have to add some detail about what they're doing so that they're at least aware of how AI is impacting their work. I think it's really easy to be using it and then completely oblivious to how much of the ideas that you're generating are not from yourself. And then they have to sign at the end to acknowledge, like honor code, that this is what I did. And so the kinds
I like that idea very much.
Yeah, because there's some things that are useful. There's a wonderful AI tool that that Ken Carter, who's speaking at the conference tomorrow, told me about called Consensus. Consensus is great for throwing in a research question and getting recommendations of articles to read. and even summarizing. Like, so you could ask a question, that might, where you want to know, what is the consensus? Does medication for ADHD help? Something like that. And it will give you a consensus meter of to what extent the literature suggests yes versus maybe versus no. And then we'll give you some suggested references. So that's a great way for students to find research articles. Now, they don't always find the best things, but it's often better than Google Scholar. So we're like, yes, use it for that. Use it to generate ideas for measures that you might use or methods that you might use in your research. But knowing that you need to have real academic citations to support methods and measures that you're putting in your paper. So if ChatGPT gives you an idea, you better go find a real article that supports that idea. And every article that you cite in your paper must exist. And at a minimum, you should at least read the abstract of that paper to make sure that it supports the point that you're making. We have some other things too, like, an occasional sentence that you need help trying to figure out how to phrase, grammatical checks, things like that. But we don't want them using it to draft their entire paper. We don't want them using it to edit their entire paper for them. And we want their ideas ultimately to reflect their own thinking. So that's the thing. And it's gone pretty well, except that strangely, we saw an uptake in fake references popping up in students' papers. I think because they were using it to format their reference section. And whatever tool they were using, I don't know if it was ChatGPT or what, was taking like an article name and then was making up an APA style citation for it. And so the students had lost track of what the original article was. So we were seeing more of that.
I applaud you for this, and I want no part of it because I do not want to police it. And so what I have gone more the Jane direction, which is providing alternative assessment that kind of steer clear of AI, because I just don't. Actually, and there's some research out there about, in fact, from Duke, right? Duke Business School about having people sign things, and that can change the way that people are going to interact with a project or something like this. That's great. I think that what you're doing is the way to do it. I just can't see myself doing that. Oh man,
it's tough. It's tough. And granted, my class also has a lot of in-person exams and things like that. So we have other ways we can assess learning that are not that. But I have colleagues who are teaching research methods and statistics who are having to rethink all of their assignments because they've been doing these take-home exams, and the students are just using AI to do all their analyses for them, and they're not learning and understanding what they're actually supposed to know. So it's a big problem.
I think this is great, actually. I think it is going to cause us to be innovative. New things are going to, from teaching, are going to surface that are going to make us better teachers. If any, at the least, we are reflecting on our practices a little bit more and how conducive they are to maybe AI influence.
And it won't be without pain.
Right.
This is going to be a painful disruption.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I have one more question. I don't know how we're doing on time.
Oh, we're way over time. Bridgette's got a meeting to get to, I'm pretty sure.
So this question is simple. Since the last time we talked to you, we did have COVID. And I wonder if you have seen a change in the quality of student investment or their fragility, their resilience are you seeing that at Duke? I do hear people complain about our students are really different since COVID. Is that something that resonates with you or not?
It does, but I think it was more in the first few years after COVID. So when we started coming back in 2021 and 2022, I did feel like there was what we called our COVID hangover, where the students who were coming in really were suddenly struggling with in-person exams and just with keeping up with their academic work and seemed very overwhelmed all of a sudden. And it's because these were students, during this critical time in high school, I think when they would be taking classes that are giving them more of this preparation for college level work, they were just not getting the same experience. And were hardly having to do anything in order to get really good grades. And so they had a really rough reentry period. I feel like now the students that we have this year were in middle school when COVID hit, and they seem much like the students before COVID.
Okay.
One odd, and granted, I teach at Duke, so my students are going to be weird in a variety of ways. One of the things that I've noticed that I think is actually kind of amazing is that my students really enjoy in-person interaction. So my lecture halls seem so much louder before classes start, where the students are talking to each other and they have friends that are in the class with them and they're all just chatting and catching up. And certainly there are some students off on their phone in the corner or whatever, but there's more interaction than there was in the year before COVID. So maybe there's a little bit more of this appreciation for being able to be together. But I also notice that they are more addicted to their smartphones than ever before.
And how do you manage that in that large class? Do you ignore it?
Well, and that makes me, you wrote an article since we did the last conversation on this topic. Do you still put that into practice?
Yeah. So our class at Duke, our Psych 101 is a tech-free class. So the class by default is you take notes by hand. But any student can request permission to use a tablet or a laptop. And a small number do. Some of them have disabilities and need accommodations. Right. Some of them just use a tablet and they are used to using that, and they ask, and we do some follow-up questions to make sure they have strategies in place for using their device responsibly. They also sign a contract that highlights that they will use it appropriately, and reminding them that in a tech-free class, if the students around you see you screwing around on your device, it's going to make them mad. And so just highlighting there's a clear social norm here, and if you violate it, people are going to be annoyed with you. And that helps. We also have these little device markers. So when students do have approval to use technology, they have a little, we 3D printed these little clips that go on their device. So it makes it really easy to scan the room and know that they've been approved. And so I will say with laptops and tablets, students have been great, but the phones are constantly popping out. And we do have, we don't want to overly police these things, but I do have some staff who are mostly in the back of the room who do just kind of scan and monitor. If they see a student pull out a phone just to like check a text, or it's clear the student's ordering their lunch because they're starving and they need to grab it before they go to class, we let that go. What we will step in and do something about is when someone's pulled up social media and are clearly just sitting there scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, or doing things that are very distracting. Mm-hmm. And then we have these very nice little notes that we pass them. So we'll pass them a little note that's written in a very friendly way that's just, hey, I noticed you're a little off task, like just kind of gently reminding them, and then they'll usually put it away. And that's been helpful. We do find that we have to do something. We have to say something when we see it, because if we don't enforce the norm, it will quickly unravel.
Get out of control.
And as soon as students see that other students are off task with their technology, they feel even more tempted to pull out their own, and then the whole thing just falls apart. So, but there's a little bit of a tension there. You know, sometimes, when students have been called out for their behavior, they feel a little grumpy about that for a while. And so we'll occasionally get a little comment on the course evaluation that's like, I didn't like being watched. But most students say they really like the class being tech-free. Mm-hmm. They find it more engaging. They like being present. They are learning more in the time that they're there, so it saves them time later. So it generally has worked really well. And now a lot of our classes in psychology are tech-free, so other people have followed suit.
I heard that approach that you talked about. I forget what the context was, and I immediately adopted it. And I'm pretty draconian, even about cell phones. I'll yell at students, put that away. And when I told my colleagues I was doing it, they went, oh, your student evaluations are going to tank. I said, well, we'll see. Not one person complained. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a lot of students said, thank you for doing it, because the tech environment is so distracting to me. It is. And now I felt much more engaged. So,
and as a teacher,
it's not fair to me as a teacher.
Not. And I feel that when they don't have the screens in front of them, I can be a better teacher because I have better access to their nonverbal cues. Yeah. So now if I'm boring them, they fall asleep. I will see it clearly that I have not engaged them because they are passed out in their seat. Whereas previously they would just disengage and go on their device, and it was really hard to tell that I was losing them. So I feel like I'm getting more feedback from them that's helping me.
I love that. Like, I love stand-up comedy, and I like that the measure of success in stand-up comedy is laughs. It's like very objective, right? And I like that the objective measure is tired eyes, right? In a classroom like yours. Yeah, that's a really great point. It's one of the reasons why, people might start, not allowing students to have phones in rooms, is just that presence and being able to read them and seeing it, like gauging whether the learning is happening.
I think the other thing that drives me crazy in tech is when you're doing a PowerPoint and a student pulls out the phone and snaps the PowerPoint when they already have access to the PowerPoint through Canvas. It's like, you already have this, and the fact that you took a picture of it doesn't mean that you learned it. So you're not going to do that in my class.
Yeah.
I think I'm not remembering the details of this, but I swear I read a research study at some point in time about whether students taking pictures in class of slides did anything to enhance learning, and I don't think it did.
I think it's just empty.
Plus, you're in the picture now. Which is
when I see them do
weird.
that, I'm worried that they're putting me out on social media to make fun of me or something.
Yeah.
I never know what's going on.
Yeah.
Makes me very nervous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Although I have learned that sometimes a student is doing that because they're in the back of the room and the student needs glasses but hasn't gone to get them yet. And so they're taking a picture so they can then zoom in on the slide and see something more clearly.
Yeah.
Well, in which case you could take care of that with, here's the tech agreement for you in this class,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe it is the case that sometimes students take pictures when they get excited about something and they're like, I really want to remember this, like
That does
in
happen.
this moment. Sure.
So I will say some of the biggest picture taking moments are usually when there's something like funny or surprising and they want to take a picture of it so they can share it with somebody. And that's actually really cool when that happens.
Okay. That's a special event, though, as opposed to, I'll just take a picture so that I don't have to write anything
Yes,
down.
no, I've definitely seen that too. There's a lot of.
I'm sure there'd be trouble with this, but you might even call out to students. Let me just play with this, but you might call out to students that you are welcome to take pictures when something is exciting, but and send it to somebody because I think there's like an amount of learning that happens. Like, text somebody when you learn something in this class that you're excited about.
That's actually a good idea.
I don't know.
Although it opens the door. It's the camel's nose under the tent.
Right.
Sort of problem. It's like, you do this, well, then you can just keep taking pictures. I don't want that.
I know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's like set times in a class where it's like, text somebody what you learned.
That's a neat little like exit ticket idea. So what's something that you learned today that you want to tell
Share with
somebody?
someone.
It is a lovely 1 minute assessment, sort of. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well,
Are we out of time? We're over time.
yeah.
This was
And
a
we have
delightful
It
conversation.
was fun.
a conference to get to.
do.
And
Exciting.
Bridgette, congratulations on like such a long run of this conference. It's really cool. And the textbook coming out and raising kids from 1 to whatever they are now. I guess from 0 actually, but from Psych 1. Anyway, always a pleasure to talk with you, and thanks for doing this again.
Thank you so much. Amazing to talk to both of you.